Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Project Management Principles digital event. My name is Mel, and I'm an Events Delivery Coordinator at CMI, and I'll shortly be handing over to David to begin the session today. If you have any questions during the digital event, you can ask them using the live chat box on the right of your screen, and we shall answer as many as we can during the Q&A. Today's session is being recorded, and it will be shared with you later on today for those who have booked to attend. The event recording will also be available on the CMI website and CMI YouTube channel. Now over to David, CHMC Assessment Manager, to begin.
Thanks, Mel, and morning, everybody. I hope everybody's well. What I want to do today is to talk about projects and to talk about some of the things that are important in any project. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an everyday example of how we live our lives and some of the things that we come across that actually relate to projects. And I think this is really useful because projects when we talk about projects, it very quickly gets overly complicated. And projects have been with us since the beginning of time. If you look at things like Stonehenge, for example, in Great Britain, couldn't have been built without project management. Now, what does that tell us? That tells us in a way that, there's lots of talk about different project management principles, different project management frameworks, all of which are about bringing in something new or trying to rebrand an idea that's been going on since the beginning of time, about getting stuff done and getting stuff done in a way that is organized, has a start and a finish, and helps us to recognize when things are different, when things are changing, and what we need to change. So we can think about Prince and we can think about Agile and we can think about all the other things. And really, for me, it's about finding a tool set that works for you. But remember that every time somebody brings out a new tool set, there's a reason behind why they're bringing it out. And it's not always what you think. Often it's just about making money. Now, this doesn't disparage. It's not about saying anything is wrong. Just remember that find the tools that work for you. Stick with the tools that work for you. If it is a recognized framework, work with that. If it's something else, work with what works for you. So I want to talk about what is a project first. And a project really is just that sequence of organized tasks that has a start and a finish. It's bound by a time, resources, and achieving a set of desired outputs. And it's really important to understand what those outputs are before you start a project. A project is temporary and it will always result in change. If we're not changing, we're not talking about a project really. We're talking about work as usual and altering the way we do work as usual. And that's a really important distinction to make as well. Projects are very often by their nature cross-functional. So we'll engage with people from different teams, different organizations, not the group of people that we work with all the time. Projects are unique. Each project should be unique. If you're repeating a project, it becomes business as usual. And we have to be very careful about that we're not wasting money repeating something and redeveloping something that doesn't need to be redeveloped. So we need to be very careful when we talk about projects. Is it actually a project, or are we talking about improving business as usual or working in a slightly different way to achieve the same result? And projects also by their nature are uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty. We're going to do X. These are the steps that we're going to do to get to X, but we don't really know what's happening. When we plan, remember that we're planning on the basis of what we've already learned in the past. So we're not really looking forward. We're looking at either repeating what we've done in the past if it worked, or not repeating what we've done in the past. It's very hard to predict anything in the future. So we always have that level of uncertainty. It's also important to think about what a project isn't. Projects aren't business as usual. Projects aren't open-ended. And if a project becomes open-ended, it stops being a project. And this is where you see projects that are seen to fail because they're no longer projects. And I think that's really important. And in my own experience working in the public sector in the past, this very often happens. You'll have a really good project. It kind of moves towards its end. And then we're left with a group of people who are really nice people. We like working with them. So we find them something else to do rather than being strict about it and saying, this project has ended. You can all go back to work with the teams that you were working with before, or you can go off and do something else. And we don't actually need you anymore. That's a hard thing to do when you've been working with a group of people for a while. But that is the nature of a project. It's knowing when it's done, and then it becomes business as usual. Sometimes that team will be part of that business as usual. Often they won't, because the skills you want to get something through a project are different sometimes to the skills and knowledge and abilities that you need to maintain that as business as usual. Projects aren't unfocused. They're very, very, very focused, and you should have milestones and key performance indicators in your project to show that how you're moving towards the end of the project. And it is moving towards an end, and we have to remember that. And it very much isn't more of the same. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're just revisiting something you're already doing and looking at the ways that you can improve it, that's improvement. That's not a project. So bear in mind, when we start talking about projects, make sure that everybody who you're dealing with on a project understands the nomenclature, understands what we're talking about when we're using words like project, like milestones, like key performance indicators, whatever it might be, gateways, whatever you want to call it, and make sure that everybody involved understands what's going on. Now, before we start thinking about projects in great detail, it's a really, really complicated landscape, and we can make it much more complicated than need be. We think about SMART goals, we think about finance, we think about success, we think about matrices that we're reporting on, we think about plans, we think about project plans, we think about Gantt charts, we think about all the things that we commonly see in projects. Now, the risk with that, of course, is that it can be very helpful, but the big risk is that you can get tied up in the processes, tied up in the landscape, forget what it is that you're trying to achieve, lose sight of why you're doing what you're doing, lose sight of what the end game is and how you're progressing towards that, and lose sight of why you're doing this in the first place. So try not to get tied up in the tools, try not to get tied up in the fancy frameworks and all of the things that we see nowadays about projects, the tools that go with it, Microsoft Project, all the various other things. Try not to get tied up in that, tied up in the meetings. Remember what it is that you're trying to achieve and why you're trying to achieve it. That will keep you on track more than anything else. When we talk about project management, there are a number of stages that are involved in this. There's obviously starting a project. What are we going to do? Why are we going to do it? Initiating that project. This is how we're going to do it. This is how it's going to flow through. Directing that through the process of flow. Controlling that project. What happens when? Who's involved? Who needs to do what now? All of those kinds of things. And importantly, closing a project. So there are really 5 stages to think about when we're thinking about the framework of a project. We can also think about the various aspects of a project. So what is it going to cost? When is it likely to be finished? When is it going to start? We think about the quality that we're expecting. Are we looking for a gold standard project? Are we looking for a bronze standard project? What are we looking for in terms of quality? Remember that the quality time cost triangle rather. You can have good quality, but you can't have it cheap. You can have it quick, but it won't necessarily be good quality. So think about those things as well. Think about scope. And when we think about projects, it's really easy to lose track of scope. What is in the project? What isn't in the project? Now, if you clarify that early on, it's really easy to maintain that as you go through, because you can say, no, that isn't in scope. So when people come along and say, oh, could you just? I've got a builder in the house at the moment, and one of the things that builders hate is, oh, while you're here, could you just? Can you have a look at this as well? So we need to think about those things. What's in scope? What isn't in scope? And if something becomes in scope, what are the ramifications in terms of timescale, quality, and cost? So keep visiting these things. We think about risk. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? What has gone wrong? What do we need to deal with? And there's a difference here between the risk and an issue. So a risk is something which may happen. This may go wrong. We may run out of money. We may overrun in terms of time. What if there's a pandemic? What if there's a strike? What if something else happens? Issues are something that have happened, and we need to react to those. So this has happened. This has gone wrong. This has changed. This has cost more than we thought it was going to cost. So we need to think about those things as well. And all the time, think about the benefits. Why are we doing this? What's the benefit of this process going through? How is it going to look and feel different at the end? We need to think about all these things. And one of the things I like to think about a lot really is Kipling's 6 serving men. So why, who, what, where, how, when. These things will keep you going in all sorts of areas, and I find these tools really, really useful in terms of planning, in terms of managing, in terms of decision making, in terms of project management. So we think about the why. What's the business case? Why are we doing this? What are we trying to solve? What's the problem here that we're trying to address? Who's involved? Think about the organization. What organizations are involved? What teams are involved? Which individuals are involved? Think about the quality, the what. What is the quality of this going to be? Is it quick and dirty? Is it going to be top quality, top grade? Again, that will relay on what we're trying to achieve and who's involved. Think about your plans. How am I going to do this? When am I going to do this? What are those bite-sized pieces that I need to do to evolve into a whole project at the end of the day? What is the risk? So the what if this happens, what if that happens? What is the risk of involved in undertaking this project? Think about the change. So what's the impact? How will I know it's different? What's going to change as a result of this project? You think about things like HS2, for example, the change will be I can get to Manchester 30 minutes quicker than I can now. There's a lot of discussion comes into that when you think about that. Is the change worth the cost? Is the change of what you're trying to do enough to justify the project? We have to think about all these things as we go through. And then we think about progress. Where are we now and how far have we got left to go? So now we've got that, let's take that and lay all that onto something that most of us do at least once in our lifetime and see how that pans out in the real world. So I want to set a scene for you. We're going to talk about now either buying a house or renting a house. So we're going to move house. You can think about this whichever way works for you. The way I'm going to talk about it is we're looking to move into a new home. And that might be with a partner, it might be on our own, it might be as a family home, whatever it might be. It may be our first home, we may be upscaling, we may be downsizing, whatever that works for you, that you can help you think about the context of project management. We could be moving across the world, we could be moving to another country, we could be moving just around the corner, we could be moving next door. One of my neighbours moved one house down. I mean, you have to say why, you have to try and understand what's going on there, but they actually moved one house down. But wherever we're moving, whatever we're doing this, whatever reason has kicked this off, whether it's a change of life, something that's happened in the family, you're moving with the family because the family's grown, whatever it is, whatever those details are there for you to decide as we go through this. And what I would suggest is, if you haven't been through this process, relay this to something that works for you in everyday life. Now, you may say, why am I doing this in everyday life rather than thinking about business? Well, the reason I'm doing that is because it's easier sometimes to recognize things that you've already done, recognize things that aren't tied up in a massive framework, that aren't tied up in strict little pockets that we find very scary, and we think, I can't do project management because I don't understand this. You can, because you're doing this all the time. And that's why I want to talk about real life. So we think about why. We're going to talk about each of these separately, but we think about why, who, where, what, when, how, and how again. And we can repeat these as many times as we like to get through this. So why do we need a new home? What is the reason behind that? Who are the stakeholders? We think about that. Where do we want the home to be? What is the criteria for a new home? And when do we need to be in by? How are we going to finance it? And how will we know the whole project has been successful? What are our measures for success when we think about that? So let's think about each of these individually. So we think about the why now. Why do we want to move? And one of the things that you can ask yourself really is this a need or is it a want? And we're faced with this every day, aren't we? I need the newest iPhone. Do I? Or do I just want the newest iPhone? I need a bigger house with a two-car garage and a big garden. Do I? Or do I just want that? Now, if you identify that early doors, it will give you much more clarity as to why you're going through the project. It will allow you to think about financing in a much more structured way, because you're actually dealing with a problem. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't move if it's just a want. Why shouldn't you? We all want things, but it gives you a different perspective on things because you're not forced into this. You want rather than you need is a very different approach to take with a project. So think about, what is the problem? Is it that I've got another child and I need another bedroom? Is that the problem? Is it that the house is too big and I can't afford to heat it anymore? It takes too much maintenance. I don't want that. The children have left home. We don't need to keep 4 bedrooms heated. We don't need to keep 4 bedrooms clean, a separate reception room, big garden. We don't need all those things anymore. So what is the problem that I'm trying to solve here? And when we're doing this, we have to be really careful about the stories that we tell ourselves and we tell other people. And this goes back to the need versus the want, because we can tell ourselves we must have this. This will make us a better person. This will make us look good in the eyes of our peers and our friends and our family. This is the right thing to do because this is what people of our age do. This is the right thing to do because that's what's expected. So be careful of the stories you tell yourself. There's nothing wrong with having something that's perfect for you if it doesn't work for other people. So think about the stories we're telling ourselves and the stories we're telling other people about our wants versus our need. It's really useful when you're doing that to make use of metaphor and simile to help understand it for yourself, understand it for other people. And I think it's also good here to think about the ethical question. If this ended up on the front of the local newspaper tomorrow, how would I feel? It's a really good question. Would I be proud to say what I'm doing in front of friends and family? And if not, go back, think about the need, think about the want, think about what the problem is that you're trying to solve. Another good way to think about the why is, what does it feel like? What is it going to look like? What is it going to feel like? What is it going to feel like driving up to that new front door? Coming home from work to my new house? What's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like? Is it going to do what I want it to do? Is it going to represent what I want it to represent? All these things we need to think about before we even start a project. What's the need? Why are we doing it? What are we hoping to achieve? And one of the things we can think about as well is our values. Does it reflect our values, either as an individual or as an organization? What is going on with why we're doing this? If we lack clarity at that stage, the project is more likely to fail. If we have clarity, we have a need, we have a value, we have a vision in place, it's much more likely to succeed and much more likely to stay on track as we go through. So then we need to think about the who. Who else is involved in this and why are they involved? What are they bringing to the party and what do they need to know? What role do they play in the project? Do they play a role in the project or do they just need to be informed? Think about who needs to know, who needs to be told. Think about the post office, think about the utilities, think about the finance, think about anybody you want to receive Christmas cards from, for example. Who do we tell these things? And what happens if we don't is really interesting, because things get lost, things get confused, people disappear in theory if we don't have the right stakeholders involved. Who needs to help me with this? Who can contribute to the success of this project? Who will add to the risk? Who will take away some of the risk of failure for me by getting them involved? Do I need proper house movers, or am I going to hire a van, for example? Can I take out the appliances and take with me, or do I need a specialist engineer, electrician, plumber, whatever it might be to remove those things? Can I lay the carpet in the new house myself, or is that something I need to get an expert in to do? So think about all these things that you're going through that you do and you take for granted. Think about how they relate to the world of work when you're asked to manage a project. Think about where, let's think about houses here. Location, location, location. What do we want? Where is the house that we want? Do we want to live in an upmarket gated community? Do we want to live in a street that's busy and buzzing? Do we want to live somewhere in the country? Where is this project going to happen? Where does the house need to be in order to meet the things that we've identified when we initiated the project? We started that up and thinking, I want to move. Where do I want to move to? Do you want to move to the coast? Do you want to move to the city? Be in the country, live on a farm, up a mountain, in a block of flats? Where is it you want to be? And if you understand the why, you'll understand the where a lot better. When does the project start? Where does the project start? Does it start with looking at our finances? Does it start with speaking to our bank manager about a mortgage? Does it start in the estate agents? Where does the project start? Does it start walking past an estate agents on the high street and we see a house in the window that we like the look of? Does it start when we're out on our run in the morning and we pass a house that's always made us scream with jealousy because this house is beautiful? All we're seeing is a facade. Does that facade hide something that we're not seeing? Does it give us what we want inside? We don't know, But again, we tell ourselves a story that this is the house of my dreams because it has lovely windows. It's got that grey cladding, wood-like cladding on it, and it's got a lovely slate-coloured front door with a porch. What's inside, we don't know. So we tell ourselves that story. We need that clarity in order to start the project, in order to make the project a success. And when we're thinking about where, we need to think about where does it finish? Where does this project end? Where do I stop and say, that was a success, that's done, put it to bed, move on, start the next one? We need to think about the what. What are the criteria? What are the success factors here? What are the risks, benefits, and what's the quality like? So think about your criteria. Again, relay this back to the initiating your project. What do I want to achieve? What's the problem? Is it a want versus a need? What are the criteria for this? Does it have to have 3 bedrooms? Does it have to have 2 receptions and a kitchen? Does it need an island in the kitchen? I always wanted a kitchen big enough to put an island in. I don't need a kitchen big enough to put an island in. I'd more cleaning, more heating, more things to fill up the cupboards. There are whole lots of risks that go with that outweigh the benefits. The cost of doing that would outweigh any benefit I would have, because I would still work around my cooker and my little bit of worktop to cut up things on, somewhere I can put my chopping board, somewhere I can put my knives and my kettle. So think about, what does success mean? What does success look and feel like? Again, think about those emotions. What am I going to feel like standing in that kitchen? What am I going to feel like? What does it look like to me? Does it look cozy? Does it look nice? How does it look and feel? Talked about the risks. What happens if the project fails? I'm buying this house. I want this house. Decided where it is. Decided what the criteria are. Decided how many bedrooms it has. Decided how many reception rooms. It's got a garage. All the rest of the things I want in a house. But what if the project fails? What if I'm left where I am now and I can't move? What does that mean? What happens next? Who needs to be involved in that? And is there a plan B? And when you think about finance, there always has to be a plan B. So why not a plan B with everything? We don't have to enact the plan B, but it's always good to have that comfort of a safety blanket and a plan B. Think about when this is going to happen. Think about the milestones that are involved with this. When does the project start? Does it start as soon as my oldest child goes to university? Or do we give them 6 months to make sure they're not going to come back? Do we let their bedroom out? Do we put their bedroom on Airbnb for a few months while we're deciding what we want to do? When does the project start for you? When do the key things within the project need to happen? When do I need to speak to the bank manager? When do I need to engage an estate agent to sell this house? When do I need to engage the utilities people? When do I need to engage professionals who are going to help me do all the things that we talked about? How do they play into this project? I don't need them all involved from day one. So when do I need them? And what do I need them to do? Really, really important. When do they start what they're doing? When do they finish what they're doing and move on? They're not part of the project as a whole. Some may be, some definitely won't be. So think about that as well. You don't need a whole project team from day one right through to the end. You see that a lot in public sector, and it's why public sector projects overrun, overcost, and often fail. Be aware of that. Who do I need? When do I need them? What do I need them to do? Come in, do it, go. Get in, get out, pay them, lose them. Who needs to know when this starts and who needs to know when it finishes? Do I want my family to know? Do I want my friends to know when I'm starting? Or do I want them to know at the point when I say, I've bought a new house, I'm moving in on Friday? Who needs to know when? Who has a part to play? Where does the project end? When does the project end? I've set myself a year to move out of this house and move into my new house. So by 31st of October, 31st of August next year, I'm going to be in that house. If I'm not, what's my plan B? Where does that leave me? Is there an overrun? Do I need to negotiate that? Is it going to be delayed by a month, or is it going to be not happening at all? These are only things that we can think about when we start our project, and things that we're in control of when we're controlling a project. And remember, when you're managing and controlling a project, there's always an option to say, this isn't working. Let's knock it on the head. Let's cut our costs. Let's cut our losses and go. Call it a day. Pack it away. It's never going to do what we set out to do. We couldn't see that at the start, but now we can see it. Let's stop our investment. Let's move on. And how do we know when a project is moving towards its end? Well, we know that because we've set out those milestones, those gateways. We know what the criteria is. We know what the quality is. We know what our cost basis is. So we can measure how things are going and how they're moving towards their end. So let's think about cost for a minute. Let's think about finance. We're going to move house. How do we pay for this? Do we cash in an ISA? Do we cash in a pension? Do we take out a mortgage? At what point do you say, actually, I'm too old now to take out another mortgage. I don't want another mortgage. I want to downsize and cut my mortgage. I want to downsize and get rid of my mortgage. The kids have gone to university, I'm stuck with this big house, and I want to get rid of it, use the money that's in it to buy something smaller, pay off all my debts and be debt-free. What are our financial limitations? It's all very well me saying I want a 5-bedroom house in the country with a double garage that I can turn into a music room. I want a nice big garden I don't have to look after, so I'm going to pay a gardener. But actually, all of that is way beyond my financial capability. So what are our financial limitations in doing this? If we want to borrow more money, have we thought about the costs of that? Have we thought about the consequences of that? How is it going to affect the feel of the project at the end of the day? Is borrowing the money going to make you feel better about the project at the end of the day or not? What are our limitations? We need to be very much aware of those. We need to be aware of our anchoring bias as well. And anchoring bias is when we hear a number and we stick to it. So I might sit here, for example, and say, I want a 4-bedroom house up on the coast. And I have in mind that a 4-bedroom up on the coast may cost me £450,000 for what I want. So I anchor on that. I'm stuck now with that number. I'm working all my thinking, all the stories I'm telling myself. When I've got 450,000, or I can raise 450,000, I can have this house up on the coast. Actually, when we go and look at houses on the coast, they may be a lot less than that. We could move into them today. They may be a lot more than that. Then it comes back to our values and our vision and our mission. What is it I want a house on the coast for? Is it, do I want this massive house because I want to look big, want to look clever? Or do I want a small cottage that gives me all the benefits of living on the coast, is cozy, is cheap to run, is easy to clean, all those things? So what are the criteria? We're coming back to those things all the time. Are we still on criteria? Or have we lost track of what we're doing because we've got tied up in that exciting story that we're telling ourselves? There are a couple of checkpoints we need to do here. Can we achieve what we want to achieve with the money available? Or do we need to raise more finance? Or do we need to review what we want to achieve and cut back on that and revisit that? So what are our options? If we need more money, how do we raise more money? How do we track the money that we're spending? Where is it going? Who have we paid what? How do we know what's going on? And when does money need to be available? We don't need the 450k up front in order to buy a house. We can plan that in stages as we go along. So it's really important to tie all these things together. And I hope you can see how these are all coming together. So think about logistics. How do we start the end phase? What does that mean? When do we engage those movers? When do we hire that van if we're going to do it ourselves? How do we go about moving into our new home? Do we do it in one big hit? Do we get everything out on Friday morning? We're in our new house by Friday lunchtime. Do we do it over a period of a week, for example? If we're hiring a van and our other house is empty and there's a bit of an overlap, does that give us a chance to take a week off and just spend the whole week moving bits and pieces? We talked about who needs to be informed. How do we need to inform everyone? Do we tell them? Do we email them? Do we write them a letter? Do we send them a round robin Christmas card to those people that don't need to know initially what's happening? What do we do? How do we do these things that move us towards the end? And if there isn't anyone, is there anyone we don't want to tell? Is there anyone we don't want to know about the project? And if so, why is that? You may have fallen out with your ex-partner, which is why you're moving house. You may not want them to know where you're going. There may be reasons why you don't want people to know where you are. So think about those and make sure you cover those as well. There may be people you don't want to know about failure of a project unless they ask. Don't tell. Maybe the concept that you're working with. So think about that as well. There's two sides to all of this. Think about the what. And the what really comes in here with what have we learned? So were our original criteria met? Did we end up in the house of our dreams? Did we end up in the house that we wanted? What worked well and what didn't work well? Did I have the plan in place? Did I put the cart before the horse? Did I get my finance sorted out and I'm paying interest on my mortgage before I even found a house that was within my price range? What did I do? Did I cut off the electricity before I'd moved out? All the things you need to think about. What worked well? What didn't work well? Thinking about that, what would I do differently next time? And why would I do it differently next time? And thinking about that ethical question I'm often talking about, think about what's your proudest moment here? What would you want on the front page of the newspaper? What would you want to tell your friends and family at the next family gathering that you get to? And importantly as well, what don't you want to end up in those arenas and why? What is your least proud moment? What would you never want to tell anybody about again? And why would you feel that that was the case? And it's really important to understand that, because that will help you learn in the future. Think about communication. Communication is the massive thing that runs through all of this. Communication will help you get through a project. Lack of communication will almost certainly cause it to fail, because people will fill in any gaps themselves, tell themselves those stories, and it will always be black. It will never be good. It will always be dark and sinister. So think about how you're communicating. Make your communicating timely. Make sure the people that need to know. Make sure they need to know what they need to know when they need to know it. Make sure people that don't need to know, don't know. But if they don't need to know, tell them why they don't need to know. Don't leave a gap, because people will fill it in themselves. So think about all that and communicate as much as you possibly can. Tell everybody everything unless there's a reason not to. So think about it from both sides. Make sure you keep records. What did I tell people when? What did I do when? How much have I spent? Who needs to be involved when? Did they get involved? Did I need to get somebody else? Think about any negotiations you need to enter into. Do I want to negotiate? Do I want to pay the price that it says for the house? Do I want to negotiate that? Do I want to knock it down a bit? Do I want to see if I can get 20 grand off the price? Do I want to see if I can get 10 grand off the price? Do I want the curtains and carpets involved? Do I want all the appliances there? Think about when I'm selling my house, what am I negotiating here? Am I negotiating for curtains and carpets? What are the things I don't really care about and I don't want to take away that would possibly add value to the project for the other person? So think about these things and think about negotiating. Are you prepared to negotiate? Is it in your culture to negotiate, or do you need to get somebody else involved to do the negotiation for you? And think about your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What is your walk away? What is the point when you say, this is over, this is done, I'm not going to continue with it, I'm going to stop it now and put it to bed, walk away, cut my losses? What is the point at which you do that? What is the line that you will not cross in terms of this project? Think about all of these things. And all of these things will help your project be a success and make the difference between ending up somewhere like this or somewhere like this. Both of these are options if you don't manage the project properly. You want this, you lose the clarity, you lack communication, you don't understand what the milestones are, you don't understand why you're doing it, you've not identified the need and the want, not identified the problem you're trying to solve, you've not communicated that properly, and this is what you end up with. So be very careful about all these things. Some final takeaways for you. Establish the problem you're trying to solve early doors, because without that, you won't know why you're doing the project, and it will become a vanity project instead of a real project. Think about what success looks like. What does success mean? What are the criteria for success? Open your communication lines and make sure those lines stay open. Communicate, 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 and then communicate some more. And if you want to check, communicate a bit more, just to make sure that everybody who needs to know knows what's going on. And remember, the key there is needs to know. Establish your milestones. So if this is going to be a 12-month project, what should have happened at the end of month 1, should have happened at the end of month 2, should have happened at the end of month 3, and so on and so forth. If we get to the end of month 1 and we've not done what we should have done, what's the effect of that going to be? What's plan B on that for the next month? What are the knock-ons? Who needs to know about that? Who needs to be told about that? Who needs to be involved? Who can help us achieve what we need to achieve by the end of month 2? That comes in as part of reviewing the progress. Review the progress regularly and honestly. Don't tell yourself a story about it. Look at the data, look at the facts. This is what I said I was going to do at the end of month 1. Have I done it? If not, why not? How can I put it right? Is it reality? Was I smart about my goals in the first place? Think about all those things. Building flexibility for yourself, be kind to yourself, building flexibility for the project. Where's the wiggle room? We often talk about wiggle room. What things absolutely have to be done by the end of month one, what things will be nice to be done by the end of month one, and know the difference between the two. What things absolutely must happen in this project and what things are nice things to have. Importantly, very importantly, with any project, have a plan B, but have an exit strategy and know when to enact either plan B or the exit strategy. Because if you don't know when you're going to do that, what's your walk away? What's your BATNA? Think about that. Think about what will kick in order to make you say, done, cut it there, stop, move on. Feels a bit off leaving it on a dodgy note like that, a negative. But let's be honest, successful projects aren't always successful in the sense that they achieve what they set out to do. You can have a project that doesn't achieve what it sets out to do, but is successful because of the learning that comes from it. I will never try to do that again. I will get somebody in who knows exactly what they're doing. I will get somebody in who can help me with this rather than try to do this myself. Because when I try and do it myself, it falls apart. So that's a learning. That's a massive bonus from attempting that. The madness, of course, is you keep attempting it, and don't get any help and keep expecting a different result. So that's the end of the input from me. I'm going to hand back now to Mel because I think we might have some questions.
We certainly do. Thank you for your presentation, David. I'm sure it was very helpful for those that are watching. So we'll start off with the pre-submitted questions. The first one is from Alex, and he's asked, is it necessary to be a subject matter expert to be a project manager?
That's a really good question, Alex, and my answer is absolutely not. And by nature of a project where they're cross-functional, you can't be a subject matter about everything. What you have to be is very organized and very structured to be a good project manager. And I think hopefully you've learned some ideas and some tips from what we've talked about this morning, but you don't need to be a subject expert yourself, no. It helps if you are, but it's not necessary, no. Your expertise comes in organization, communication, keeping people on track, keeping people doing what they need to do when they need to do it.
Perfect. There's a question from Colin. He's asked, what are the top 3 things to consider when managing a change program that is preparing an organization for the post-pandemic new normal?
Really good question, Colin, and really topical. For me, I think the top 3 things are the need versus the want. So I'm going to do 4 things here. The need versus the want is one thing, or 2 things, whichever way you want to look at it. The values of what you're trying to achieve and why. Why are you trying to achieve what you're doing? What are the values of that? And think about the cost and the benefits. So 3 things, 6 words. Hopefully that helps. The bottom line really is, so why are you doing what you're doing? Keep that in mind. How does that fit in with your values? And are the costs worth the benefits? Is the candle worth the light, as my old boss used to say?
Perfect. There's a question from Sebastio. He's asked, what are the unmissable stages of any project? In other words, what stages of a project are universal regardless of scale?
Another good question, Sebastio. We've got some really good questions today. I think this is going to sound like a strange answer, but for me, the unmissable stages are the start and the finish. Now, what I mean by that is sometimes you can drift into a project and you're not really sure that it's a project till after it seems to have started. So knowing when a project actually starts, and again, what you're trying to achieve and going back to those criteria is really, really important. And the very, very key one, there are stages in between with the milestones and the gateways that we talk about that you will set up for yourself. And those will vary from project to project, the number of them you have, the intensity of them, the frequency of them. But a real key one is, when does it end? And again, that sounds like a really strange thing, but when does a project become business as usual? And if you can't identify that, then you need to go back to the drawing board, because If not, it will just drift off and become a project that becomes 2 years, becomes 3 years, becomes 4 years. Everybody's still calling it a project, but it long since became business as usual. And that changes the way you manage it. It changes the way you think about the people involved, changes the way you think about the cost, changes the way that you operate on a day-to-day basis. But so that the two key things for me are the start and the finish, because projects are by their nature contained within a time frame.
Brilliant. And last question is from Melina. She's asked, can you give tips and tricks to help manage ad hoc requests that do not change strategic direction by delay execution?
Again, a really good question from Melina. And I think the key here, Melina, is communication. And that sounds like a trite answer, sounds like a simple answer. But it's about asking, for me, it would be about asking why the ad hoc requests are coming in. What do they add to the overall project? How do they fit in with the values and the mission for the overall project? Have the people requesting them understood what the consequences of that is in terms of cost, in terms of time delays, in terms of overruns, in terms of overall quality of the project at the end of the day? So really, it's about asking those questions and making sure that everybody involved is really clear about why that's happening, what it's going to add, and what the costs of that are, both financial and time and resource and everything else. So the biggest tip of all with projects is communicate. Ask questions, be curious, and keep talking.
Perfect. We'll now move on to the live questions. We have had a question from Hajid. He's asked, as a project manager, what is the best way to track their team progress? What reporting mechanism works best?
Again, this is thank you, Hajid. This is sounds like a cop out and sounds like a trite answer. The simple answer is whatever works for you. That could be something like Project in a Box. It could be something like Microsoft Project. It could be one of the other frameworks that are available, one of the many, many, many tools that you can use for reporting and tracking. You could do it on the back of the envelope. You could do it on the back of a fag packet, as we used to say. It really depends on what works for you. Some of the problems happen when people try to use project management software, project management tools, which they don't like, and they're forced into using because that's seen as the thing to use, really. I've seen projects done on MS Project. I've seen projects done in Project in a Box. I've seen projects done on Excel. I've seen projects done on notebooks. Depending on the size of the project, depending on the complications involved, it's about what works best for you. In terms of reporting, what's the best way of reporting? That's something you'd need to set up with the stakeholders at the beginning of the project. We've talked about communication, but obviously on a 40-minute session this morning, there's limits to what we can talk about. But reporting has to be agreed with the stakeholders at the beginning. How often, who are you reporting to? What is it you're reporting about? Are you reporting about helicopter views, or are you reporting about the minutiae of what's gone on within a particular milestone or within a particular gateway? Are you reporting as RAG ratings, red, amber, green, as simple as that, or are you going into lots of detail? What is it that your stakeholders want? What is it they expect? And how are you agreeing that from the start?
Excellent. We had a question earlier from Hannah. She's asked, do you think this project management structure is important for entrepreneurs who are often quite passionate about their business so that they don't rush into projects too quickly?
Yes, Hannah. Yeah, I think it is important. But that structure, again, has to fit the individual. Now, from my experience of working with creatives, for example, it's difficult to track people down. They lose track of what's going on around the passion. So having some kind of framework that works for them, I think, is really important. And it can be as simple as some of the things we've talked about, the 5 elements of a project, the 6 phases of a project, the things to consider. It's very easy for entrepreneurs to get tied up in their passion, their drive, what it is that they're trying to put into the world without thinking about the consequences around it. And that's where good project managers can come in and support and help people. But it is that structured framework that will get you through the project. Yeah. But again, whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be a big name structure. It can be anything as long as it works for you.
Great. So unfortunately, we are running out of time, but we have one more question from Randall. How important are organization skills for a project manager, and have you got any big tips in developing such skills?
Hi, Randall. Thanks for the question. Organisation skills are massively important for project management because remember, you're herding cats in a sense. You're working with people who potentially sometimes don't want to work with you. They're being forced into it by their managers. You're working for people who do work for you, but potentially have a different vision, slightly different vision to yours. And, think about those two house pictures. You're working with people who don't necessarily understand what you're talking about if they're from a different team. If you're using slang and jargon that you use. So you need to be very organized in how you bring these people together, very organized in the structure, the communication, who needs to know what, when, what does that involve? Is everybody speaking the same language? All of those things. So by far and away, organizational skills are the most important. You're also organizing people to get things done at a certain time. So some leadership and management skills are very important as well. How you learn those, find a mentor, find somebody who you respect, who does it already, get to shadow them, get to see what they do, get to see how it works. And then you can start to pick those up yourself, get involved, help people who are already running projects. What can you do for them? What can you bring to the project that's going to add benefit? And what can you take away from the table that's going to benefit from you in the longer term as well? So you're almost treating yourself and your self-development as a small project, if you like. This is who the stakeholders need to be involved. This is my mentor. This is my teacher. This is who I'm going to follow. This is why. This is what I'm hoping to achieve from it. So again, we're using those project skills to develop ourselves as well.
Perfect. So yes, we have unfortunately come to the end of it. So thank you to everyone who joined, and thank you, David, for your insights and expertise.
Thank you.
If you're a member of CMI, you can log into Management Direct using the link in the live chat, where you can find a wide range of exclusive and practical development resources and much more. If you're not yet a member, why not join our community via the link as well in the live chat, where you can gain full access to our Management Direct portal. And you can also sign up to the free CMI newsletter for the latest trends and tips for managers and leaders. Please also do take a few minutes to fill out our evaluation form, which is in the live chat. We really appreciate your thoughts from today's event. So thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.